Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested, and today I'm going to be reviewing the Meta Quest 3. Yes, it's out this week. Some of you may actually already have it, and I've actually been using this review unit that Meta sent me for the past week and a half. So today I'm going to dive deep into the hardware, my experiences, hopefully answer some of the questions you had coming out of its announcement at Meta Connect just over 2 weeks ago now, and share how it compares with the Quest 2, the Quest Pro, and what its unique features brings to VR today. Let's dive in. So a review like this, typically I'd start out with the display, something that we assume is the most important part of a VR headset. But today I'm actually going to start with the lens, the optics, because the biggest improvement, in my opinion, between the Quest 3 and its predecessor, the Quest 2, is the lens system. It uses the same pancake optics that the Quest Pro introduced last year. Actually, it is technically a iteration on top of that, but they're almost exactly the same, in my opinion. And what that means is that you're getting not only improved image quality and clarity across the entire eye box, but also benefits in terms of the weight and the weight distribution of the headset as well. It's a much smaller form factor in what's in front of you. The clarity really is the standout feature here. So paired with the LCD panels, two LCD panels this time, you're getting basically a crisp view across your entire field of view, which means not only more that you can see in a scene, whether it's Passthrough mixed reality or inside a fully immersive VR game, but also in terms of finding the perfect fit. In previous VR headsets, when you're using Fresnel lenses or hybrid lensing, is finding that sweet spot was something we'd always have to fight for. What that eye box size was, where your eyes would have to fit, and then how much of a clear image could you see. Here, not only is that sweet spot super easy to find, with even minor jostling and adjustments, you're not going to lose focus, not going to lose clarity where your eyes are, but you also see that clear image. And testing that field of view with the What is my field of view application, I actually found that the Quest 3's field of view was better than I expected. Horizontally, I was able to get 109 degrees field of view while wearing glasses. Now that's using the closest face relief distance, but still adding a little bit of space between the lenses and my eyes because of my glasses. But without my glasses, during that same test, I was actually able to achieve that 110-degree field of view that they claimed in their marketing materials. Vertical field of view, I actually got 100 degrees when pressing my eyes right on the lenses, which was higher than their stated 98 degrees. So huge improvement over the Quest 2, and even I think better than the Quest Pro in terms of the field of view. Now that's also paired with these new LCD panels. All three of these headsets in front of me, the Quest 2, Quest 3, and Quest Pro, have a different way of display panels. If you recall, the Quest 2 was a little bit of a cheat. They used a single LCD panel that was in landscape orientation, and so there were some pixels in between in that stereo overlap that you never get to see, wasting those pixels, and also you wouldn't get true IPD adjustment. You had these presets as well as a virtual IPD adjustment in the actual display itself. Quest Pro did go back to two displays, so two LCDs here, and with very similar resolution, render resolution as the Quest 2, but also got local dimming as well as a quantum dot layer for better colors and a relatively bright headset given the pancake optics. Quest 3 uses a higher resolution panels for each eye. So the resolution now is actually 2064 by 2208 per eye, very close to that 2160 by 2160 that we saw in headsets like the HP Reverb G2, and actually a higher pixel density at 24 pixels per degree. Now, there's a caveat there, because this is still running a mobile SoC. Meta actually has the render target of these panels as 1680 by 1760 per eye. So what the native desktop UIs and what most games are targeting at 1x resolution is not going to be the full resolution of the panels itself. You're going to actually have to add anti-aliasing or super sampling after the fact if you're tethered to PCVR, for example, to make the most out of those panels. That's still, they say, a 30% increase over what the Quest 2 and the Quest Pro's native resolution was, and that was 1440 by 1584. And that is noticeable in things like the user interface. Once you boot up, the home screen, the menus, everything is a little crisper and sharper, even though I can tell a little bit anti-aliasing is still needed. Having the rendered resolution be super sample, being higher than the native resolution of the headset is actually a preferred thing to do in VR headsets. It's why when you wear the Valve Index or the big screen beyond, what you want to actually have Steam VR set to is higher than native resolution, because that compensates for some of the pixels, the detail that's lost in the lens distortion. Now, that may be minimized because it's using pancake lenses here, but there's still going to be a little bit of warping and adjustments that the lens has to compensate for to wrap it around your field of view. And so to have the default buffer be lower than the target resolution and not even higher than that, I think speaks to still where mobile VR is today. That's one advantage that native PCVR headsets still have over mobile VR. Now, it does support up to 120 hertz out of the box in an experimental mode. You can run 80 hertz, 72 hertz, 90 hertz as well. Games will basically run at 90 hertz here as a default setting, but you can turn on 120 hertz if developers want to enable that, as well as if you want to use something like virtual desktop or PCVR streaming. Oculus Link, AirLink will support 120 hertz as well. That's nice that that came right out of the box. Now, while the resolution of the LCD panels here I think are much improved over the 2 and even the Pro, there are some trade-offs. So it's the contrast levels and the black levels I find a bit lacking. There's no local dimming here, so if you're running PCVR streaming, for example, which started supporting local dimming earlier this year, you're going to see more compression artifacts being more noticeable, and even things like watching a movie in a virtual cinema, the black levels, I did miss the pure blacks of the OLED panels in Big Screen Beyond, and the local dimming. Those slightly better black levels that I found in the Quest Pro, that was noticeable here. Here, everything, the dark levels are basically very, very dark gray. It looks like an LCD panel. Though with those pancake optics, no mirror, there's very little, almost no God rays and flaring at all. So it's a little bit of bloom that I noticed on super high contrast scenes, but very impressed by the optics and the panel combination. Now, something that's not really talked about with the headset, and a lot of people haven't mentioned, is like the Quest Pro, the design of the optics and lenses actually has the lenses angled. The Meta optics team decided that with these pancake lenses and to achieve maybe the field of view, the horizontal field of view they wanted, what they did is they took what normally would be an LCD panel done this way, and they rotated it about 20, 22 degrees, tilted in. It's something that it's noticeable if you capture video from the headset with the Meta Developer Hub, and you'll see that the image is actually offset outward, so to compensate for the actual physical tilt of the screen. So it's tilted this way and tilted this way, and there's a couple interesting kind of artifacts of that that's worth discussing. First of all, it means that I think that's how they achieve their 109, 110 degree horizontal field of view. So you're getting a little bit wider by tilting the screens that way. It also means that you're actually, the way the lenses are oriented, you're actually getting more of a field of view in the lower area where maybe your hands would be. So in your whole field of view, the near field stuff typically happens in the lower half of your peripheral vision. And so they're sacrificing a little bit of detail, for example, on the upper right and upper left parts of your field of view, which is noticeable when I ran that FOV test. If you really press your eyes against the lenses and you want to peek into the corners, you can see actually not where the lens or not where the panels necessarily cut off, but where the render actually stops rendering. You can see a little bit of kind of, I would describe it maybe like this kind of scalloping in the rendering in the top corners. But the most interesting artifact, and something that I can't not see because that's due to these panels being tilted, is actually the crispness of horizontal lines. So if you look at this analog here, and if on a traditional headset or older headsets, you would have the pixels basically be perpendicular to your horizon and these vertical planes. So things like menus, web browsers, the frame of a video border, if you are looking straight on and you're level, you would see a straight line where those pixels are. But because they angle the LCD panels, you actually see more aliasing along those horizontal planes. It's noticeable if you put the headset on and you tilt your head about 22 degrees or so, you can actually see that aliasing change in just the menu and the home screen, which it's something that I can't not see. It's something that bugs me a little bit when I'm watching a movie in a big virtual cinema and I'm watching a high bitrate 4K movie, which looks incredible in this headset, but the borders maybe aren't super sampled, and so I'm noticing that extra aliasing. I get why they did it for the field of view benefits, and I think they did have some advantages with the lower resolution screens in making text be less of a, you see less of a screen door effect when you have curved objects and rendering text when you have the pixels at this angle. But for things like those horizontal planes, boxes, web browser windows, it is something that I have noticed and it sticks out. I don't think they're going to change their styling because I think the benefits outweigh some of those advantages. So hopefully that's compensated in the future with some extra super sampling in that home screen menu. Now, the other major benefit of these pancake lenses is that the whole optics stack is now compressed. And so the whole headset, while it technically weighs a little bit more, a few more grams than the Quest 2, feels a lot lighter. It's actually ergonomically such a better headset to wear because the weight doesn't feel like it's protruded as much from your face. Now, there's still all the compute, all the battery is still in the front here. And as you can see, there's actually a vent around the front here. That's what this ring is for. The headset does get a little bit warm when you're using it. You can actually feel that mostly at the top here. You can feel that heat heating up. But using even the soft straps, which I hated with the Quest 2, the soft straps that come with the Quest 3 are very usable. I did still find myself adjusting it just because of the way the soft straps would rest on my ears and how high they would sit in the back of my head. It wasn't that the headset felt like it was gonna fall off or, with fast movements, it was gonna slip off, but I always wanted to tug the back of the head strap just back a little bit because I'm so used to the cupping and the cushioning of a hard head strap. So they do sell a new Elite head strap for the Quest 3, which is what I have used here. And after a couple days of using the soft strap, I just have the Elite head strap on all the time now. Installing it is super easy. It is actually not compatible with the Quest 2 Elite head strap, not only because there's now the headphone jack as well as the USB 3 ports on the sides here, but it's actually a bigger design. It's a taller design. And I want to say the material here, the plastic here, is thicker than it was on the Quest 2. So those Quest 2 Elite straps famously had material issues where many users had them snap on them. I had mine snap on after a couple of months of use. This so far feels pretty sturdy, and having that full cushion over the back of my skull is just that much more comfortable. I feel like it's an essential accessory, if not this head strap, then any third-party hard head strap over the cloth straps on the Quest 3. Something I was really also impressed by and surprised by was how well the facial interface also fit over my glasses. I talked in my preview for the Quest 3 about being concerned that I would miss the ergonomics of the Quest Pro with its halo-style head strap. The pressure was on the forehead, but I would see no pressure on my cheeks, no pressure on that facial interface, and actually get additional peripheral field of view and comfort when using mixed reality pass-through. I actually found that the facial interface on the material and also the pressure when using the Elite head strap, not bad at all on the Quest 3 here, to a point where my glasses fit really easily inside this facial interface. With the Elite head strap, it didn't feel like my glasses were stuck in here. I didn't feel pressure on my temples or my glasses pushing against my face. And the facial interface does have 4 levels of relief for people with thicker glasses, different face shapes. I was able to use my glasses comfortably on a regular basis with it being the closest setting, which was something I didn't believe that I was able to do. So maximizing the benefits of the field of view while still wearing my glasses. I haven't had a chance to live with the new Zenni optical lens inserts, but at MetaConnect, they did have some of those samples for me to use in a test run. And using that, I actually found that the inserts pressed against my cheeks and my eyebrows a little bit when I was using the nearest facial interface setting. So I will have to test that later, but I suspect that given how comfortable these are with my glasses, that glasses are going to be just fine, that you don't need to actually wear contacts or go with the inserts if you don't want to. If you wear glasses, they work just well in this interface. They will sell different colors as well. One thing I wish is that you had a choice between the black, the salmon orange, or that cool blue color out of the box, and you'd have to spend an extra $50 to get a different head strap and facial interface color. But I understand where they're going with trying to sell aftermarket accessories. With the Quest 3, they've also changed up some of the layout of the hardware buttons and controls. So you have the power button now here on the left side. Underneath, there is that IPD dial, which does use that range of 53 to 75 millimeters, though technically it's really 58 to 70 millimeters of hardware adjustment, but they're giving themselves that extra 5 millimeters of space because of the clarity of that eye box. Then there's also the volume buttons on the other side. There are these 3 contact chargers to use with their charging dock, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But a peculiar design decision, I thought, was putting the headphone jack, the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, on the right side. Now, for the vast majority of my testing here, I used the built-in sound, which I thought was improved, much improved over the Quest 2. It's much louder to a point where I never felt like I needed to use those max volumes, but spatially, the sound is actually really nice. If you're in a movie environment or in a game environment where there's headlock spatial sound, I felt like the sound using the built-in speakers was more spatial, if that makes any sense, to a point where I didn't feel like I needed to use headphones at all. But if you do use earbuds, the headphone jack being on the right side, that's non-traditional. Most headphone jacks are on the left side for headsets. And if you have accessories like, this set of Logitech headphones where there's a shorter cord on the right and a longer cord on the left, that wouldn't work because these are designed for the headphone jack to be on the left side, where the shorter side is your left stereo and the longer side is your right stereo. So accessories like this aren't going to work well with the headphone jack placement here. That's unfortunate. So in addition to changing up the location of the hardware buttons and some of the inputs on the Quest 3, they also changed up the placement of the sensors. And it's been really interesting to see that between the Quest 2 Pro and 3, the camera arrangements are all in different places, which tells me that their inside-out tracking algorithms can be calibrated for any arrangement of camera placements. You just have trade-offs in terms of the visibility and the field of view for the tracking, as well as, I guess, the resolution of that pass-through. And pass-through mixed reality is one of the big standout features on the Quest 3. So let's talk about that first. In the front are 2 tracking cameras that are paired with 2 RGB cameras. So to get color pass-through, the Quest Pro had a single RGB camera that did a color overlay over the reprojected geometry of its tracking cameras. And it was relatively low resolution, that RGB camera. Here you have 2 4-megapixel cameras, and it's now stereo imaging, and those stereo color images overlay on top of, again, another reprojected image. That gives you true depth for near field and faraway objects. It's not just like looking at stereo video, there's actually reprojection going on. That's why you see that kind of warping when you bring objects close up to your face, because it wants to get that real geometry or really show perfect stereo imagery for all these near field and far field objects. The pass-through video, as you can see, both with the video capture as well as some through the lens imaging that we did, is good and I think much improved for sure over the Quest Pro, but I would still call the images a little bit grainy. But when we're talking about pass-through mixed reality, we're not only looking for clarity, we're also looking for how well the camera systems and the display systems adjust to things like exposure and also fast movement, the frame rate. And that's where I feel like these cameras still fall short of what we want for really compelling mixed reality pass-through that feels more seamless with the real world. In a perfect lighting environment, the images are clear. So you can look around your living room with natural sunlight. You can even pull up your phone, and yes, your emails may be visible on your phone. And exposure compensation is good. It's relatively fast. It's not doing any kind of HDR processing where it's compiling multiple exposures. So it is kind of like on a camera, on a video camera, it's adjusting the exposure on the fly when you're looking outside a window, for example, versus looking at an indoor environment. So you can, it's prioritizing, visualizing detail over a balance of exposure. Now, where that runs into some hiccups is when you're looking at screens like on your phone or your computer display. So your phone screen is actually brighter, pretty bright compared to a normal indoor lighting environment. And so the kind of the weighting it does, the exposure rating, the metering it does on the brightness of the scene doesn't always react or compensate fast enough so that you can make things like your phones more visible versus looking at someone's face. So if you're outdoor and you're looking at your phone, that might work. If you're indoor and you're looking at your phone, things might be shifting a little bit. Lower light environments, you can definitely tell that they're bumping up the ISO and they're lowering some of that shutter speed. So you're also not getting a ton of fast movement tracking. So I do see kind of ghosting of images as I move my hand real fast in front of the frame. Something very noticeable when you're moving like the rendered controller, the Touch Plus controller in front, which is a perfect 90 hertz representation of that controller. The video image of your hands is, while aligned and is basically where that rendered controller is, doesn't keep up with that rendering as well. If you're looking at a computer monitor, I found looking at, for example, a desktop monitor really hard to look at in a low light evening scene in my home office. I wanted to be able to not only see my keyboard, but also see the images on my desktop, on my computer monitor. That's not going to work well with this technology. I would still call this mixed reality the point and shoot days. If you're talking about the equivalent of camera technologies, we've maybe moved beyond the 640 by 480 black and white cameras, the low res cameras, the VHS era of pass-through mixed reality, but we're still kind of in the early point and shoot digital days, still waiting for the DSLR mirrorless days, the 4K days of pass-through mixed reality, which means there's a lot still to develop. And that could be a combination of not only choosing the right lenses and the right sensors for those pass-through cameras, but also the SoCs having enough for that bandwidth to process the images. This is maybe a case where Apple, with all the imaging pipeline that they've developed for the camera systems on their iPhones, all that is inherited on the Vision Pro, and so they may be doing more processing for that imagery, although still to be tested. The demo that I did of the Vision Pro was in a very controlled, even lighting indoor environment. But the Quest 3 also has one additional sensor that the Quest 2 and the Quest Pro didn't have. It has a new depth sensor, an IR sensor using structured light to map out not only a room, but also, in theory, also your hands and near field objects. So this was something that was rumored to be in development, and developers had confirmed that they had earlier developer prototypes of the Quest Pro had this, but Meta decided not to include it in the final version of the shipping Quest Pro, but something that I think adds a lot and has a lot of potential in mixed reality for the Quest 3. So I wanted to walk through what that experience and what it brings to the table with this center depth sensor. So first of all, it can be used for room scanning, so generating your Guardian boundary. Previously, you would set your floor height and you would use your touch controllers to draw a boundary in the room. Here, there's something of a more automated boundary system by default. So when you put on your headset, if you're in a new space, you can actually see the mesh tiling kind of being generated around the room, as well as a boundary which you can then adjust after the fact. So it simplifies that process if you don't want to draw your own boundary, which I still think I prefer to do because I sometimes draw a boundary over objects in my space that I am okay having well within the confines. It also is used in room scanning for mixed reality experiences. So you can look around, you can actually, in addition to generating a play space, a kind of 2D boundary in a play space, you can also have one room in your house, in your play environment, mapped out using a mesh. And so this is kind of like PSVR 2 did this. You would actually look around the room and you would see again the meshing, the recognition of tables and couches, at least the shapes of those objects and chairs and your walls. And based on that mesh, it actually saves not only that geometry as a mesh data, but then it tries to infer what are walls. So it will generate these wall boundaries, these planes that actually developers can use as interactive elements in games like First Encounter or things like Figment XR. And what's interesting is the way those two systems interact. So both the geometric mesh map of the world, as well as the semantic understanding of what are planes and tables. What the Quest 3 can't do right now is it can't semantically know what is a couch and what is a table automatically. Like in the Quest 2, like in the Quest Pro, you can, with that play space, you can manually map out these volumetric spaces, rectangles right now. So you can say this rectangled area is a couch, this is a table, this is a shelf, this rectangle around the wall is a door or a window, but that's a manual process you have to generate to give the headset semantic understanding of your area. And applications right now don't really take advantage of that. Figment XR is a really great example where you can actually choose between the mesh representation of the world, which then gives you occlusion. Objects can hide behind a couch. In First Encounters, that you can see the aliens actually hide behind objects as well as pop out from the walls. But in Figment XR, you switch between your mesh or your planes, these kind of pre-mapped out objects that you use. And I actually preferred having, in some instances, having those planes because you can have this flat table, you can set objects, and if you have physics interacting with those planes, with a flat table, with a coffee table, those physics are more believable or more convincing. It's unfortunate that you can only generate these planed objects in rectangles right now, and a lot of table surfaces in my house are circular. My work area, my coffee table are circular, and you can only draw rectangles right now. But I think developers in the future will have access to combine both the mesh information as well as the semantic understanding of these planes and take advantage of that. I just don't see a ton of experiences using that right now. The other thing that the depth data potentially can do is get you better occlusion, near field occlusion, which isn't available right now. So one of the things that, for example, when you have hand tracking and you put your hand in front of your menu, the ghost representation, that outline of your hand, does surface above a menu. So you have virtual occlusion, but the video of your hand isn't mapped on top of that. And that was something that was really impressive when I did the Apple Vision Pro demo, was that it did hand occlusion, a video representation of the hand over that reprojected mapping of what it recognized your fingers to be. I'm a little skeptical that the depth sensor here, that the hand occlusion will work, because Meta says it's coming later this year, just because of the warping that I see in the mixed reality pass-through, especially in that near field warping. If you put your hand up and you put a phone up to your face, that geometry isn't perfect. It's a little wavy, lines aren't perfectly parallel or perpendicular. So when they enable the hand occlusion, that near field depth sensor enabled mapping, I'm not sure if that's going to be as good as what people will expect, or something that I would even prefer over having like the ghosted outline of my hand right now. But depth API is something that they announced at Meta Connect and something developers will be able to tap into. So not only using the mesh, but in real time, having things, virtual objects occluded and hidden behind, doors, for example, and cabinets, and a better interfacing between the virtual objects and the real world. That seems to be the potential with this depth sensor. So more to be tested when that becomes unlocked by applications in the future. Now, let's also talk about the touch controllers. These are now the Touch Plus controllers. Big question was that since they've removed the tracking ring with these controllers compared to the Quest 2, how would this compare? Now, it's kind of this hybrid between the Quest 2 and the Quest Pro controllers. Physically, they look very similar to the Quest Pro controllers. Geometrically, I mean, the 3D model for the Quest Pro controllers basically works for the Quest 3, minus the little cameras that they have on the top, because the Quest Pro controllers do their own inside-out tracking. Quest Pro controllers weigh a lot more. You can feel the extra weightness. So I'm actually really happy to return to a lighter form factor on the Quest 3 controllers. The fewer IR tracking rings actually found wasn't a hindrance. So the Quest 3 Touch Plus controllers are tracked with IR camera or IR lights here. So the cameras on the headset look at these IR lights. There's actually an additional IR light here at the base. So when you're pointing forward, that gives an additional point of reference, but also combines with your hand tracking model for visibility. And because of the new placement of the cameras on the Quest 3, there's actually pretty good tracking volume in the lower area and even behind, maybe like a little bit past 180 degrees past where your arms would go. So if you're doing a bow and arrow application, didn't find any problems with the Quest 3 controllers kind of near my ear, behind my ear here. Once you move to kind of further and twist your arm behind your back, you can see in the IK model, it's compensating with that IK and it starts jumping around a little bit. There's also a few dead zones, one right beneath your chin and also a dead zone kind of right above where your forehead is because there are no cameras above the headset. The cameras are in the front and the bottom. So once you move the controllers above your head a little bit, I don't know, for maybe your Beat Saber, your handles up there. You get rotational motion. You get a little bit of a prediction with the IK model, but quickly that starts jumping around. And as a trade-off they decide to make, I found it acceptable. And even though the Quest Pro controllers can pair with the Quest 3 for kind of your perfect inside-out tracked controllers, I found myself really happy with the responsiveness and the accuracy of the Touch Plus. Something that was also unique to the Touch Plus controllers is because it's tracking your hand and the controllers at the same time, there's also what they call hybrid input. So when you have your hands and you have maybe the direct touch interface, that is, you have your menu really close and you can kind of move the menus around by pinching them, and you can actually point your virtual finger into the menu and get the illusion of touching a button, which I find pretty good for using the virtual keyboard. You can actually do that with your finger while holding the touch controller, something you couldn't do with the Plus or the Quest 2, you couldn't do with the Pro, and you still can't do currently with the Pro, even if you pair the Pro with the Quest 3. Another advantage of the Touch Plus controllers. It comes with 2 AA batteries, so you're back to replaceable batteries, which I know a lot of people like. Actually, one thing I liked is the battery compartment really easily removes, and you can remove the lanyard as well because they sell this aftermarket accessory for basically your fitness grips, they call them. And while there are rechargeable batteries they sell with their dock, I found battery life on these new controllers to be just as impressive as with the Quest 2. One of the big surprises with the Quest 2 was how long a single AA battery could last. Here, even though there is a rechargeable battery with the dock they sent to me, I've been keeping the AA battery here for most of this testing, and with the 4-dot battery indicator, it hasn't even dropped a single dot. It's still basically between 75% and 100% capacity, even after a full week and a half of pretty intense use. So very happy there. With fewer tracking lights on here, I did have a chance at MetaConnect to ask one of the developers members, one of the Quest 3 team members, whether you would actually get better battery life on a touch controller, but they said it's basically the same battery life. Haptics-wise, it is also a huge improvement over the Quest 2 controllers, over those first touch controllers. Now there's a VCM motor, that's a voice coil motor. System right here in the grip, and that basically is a speaker system. So using their Haptics Studio, developers can generate not only the frequency but the amplitude of these customized haptics, and they feel really good on these kind of subtle vibrations, almost tonal vibrations that you get on the VCM haptics here. You lose the linear actuators, the LRA haptics on the thumb and the trigger that you got on the Quest Pro controllers, and that's a curious decision. I get why you don't get the thumb LRAs because you're not using the pinch mechanism as much, but these controllers are supposed to actually be two-stage. So while the analog, the throw here, doesn't activate as a two-stage button press, you do theoretically get an extra press in the sensor that games can take advantage of, and I felt like that would have been a great way to take advantage of having a linear actuator to give you that haptic feedback, but that's not here on the Touch Plus. And even though for the vast majority of games I was using the controller, I actually found myself really happy also with the hand tracking. And this is one of those instances where if you are coming from a Quest 2, you've seen the improvements in the hand tracking software with their hand tracking 2.0, with the direct touch, new interface. All that is inherited here, and with mixed reality being a more viable option and more comfortable with the sharp resolution screen, I found myself using the hand controls to manipulate the web browser, the virtual keyboard, and the home application a lot more. I actually really like using that direct touch input. Again, you don't get real haptics when you're pushing your finger through a virtual screen, but everything they've done to give you as much visual feedback and even audio feedback of you interacting with that screen, I think psychologically it feels really good interacting with this screen that's just floating in front of me using my hands, even though I don't get any actual real haptic feedback. Something to look forward to with their hand tracking, though, that they announced at MetaConnect is going to be the addition of micro gestures. So this feels like a little bit of a response to what Apple showed with the Vision Pro. They have, their very basic small taps as a way to interact with their menus combined with eye tracking. No eye tracking here, but I could see these micro gestures, micro taps being a less taxing way to use hand tracking and hand tracked interfaces on the Quest family of devices. So looking forward to trying that out as well. One place where the Quest 3 feels like it is a generational leap over the Quest 2, and even the Quest Pro, started to say, is in its processing power. It's using Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 Gen 2 processor. So the mouthful, because you had the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2, you had the Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 Plus, which was better thermal management, increased memory, so you didn't have to you didn't have to throttle the clock speeds as much. But here it is a generational leap in terms of being a whole new process. It's a 4-nanometer processor, which means higher clock speeds, less heat, and much faster GPU, which is where the big story is here for rendering power. With its new GPU, it is up to not only 2 times as fast, it's actually up to 2.6 times as fast the processing speed as the Quest Pro and Quest 2. Developers can choose a balance between CPU and GPU usage. If they want more CPU priority, then you get basically a 2x performance in GPU. If you want more GPU priority, a 2.6x, and if you run mixed reality takes that basically a 15% compute off the top to run mixed reality, although you're rendering, I guess, less virtual scenes, so that might all even out. With that extra graphics power, developers can not only do things like super sampling, hit that new render target, but they can choose, more post-processing effects, better shadows, dynamic lighting, high resolution textures. The memory bandwidth here is increased. And basically what that means is at the bare minimum, when developers update their games, you're going to get higher resolution with better anti-aliasing, better texture filtering, and just sharper graphics overall. Unfortunately, that doesn't come right out of the box for applications. Developers will have to update their apps to meet those new rendering targets. If you run an unupdated Quest 2 application, which I tried a bunch of here, while every application is fully backward compatible, it does look low resolution. I mean, not only do textures look low resolution, but you can tell the render targets are lower, and it doesn't automatically get better anti-aliasing, so things just look more dithered. So can't wait for more games to actually enable that and take advantage of that extra processing power. The render buffer, like I said at the top, is 1680 by 1760. It's lower than the native resolution of these panels. And so everywhere, every place where a developer can enable better super sampling, better anti-aliasing, that's going to be noticeable in this headset. I gotta say, I was wishing that the graphics would be more impressive on some of the updates. So Red Matter 2 is a great example where the updates, not only that they've done updates not only on the Quest Pro side to take advantage of foveated rendering, but they've also very quickly updated the Quest 3 version to look as close to the PC version of the game as possible. And while the effects, the textures do look great, it doesn't feel as good as PCVR. I'm still missing, your Half-Life Alyx quality graphics. If you're going to play a racing sim, for example, you're still going to get far better graphics, even on equivalent games. So Demio, Population 1, I still preferred playing the PCVR version of that streamed over Virtual Desktop, streamed over Link and AirLink than I did the native version on this headset, even with graphical updates. And with no games announced being exclusive to the Quest 3, so Asgard's Wrath 2 will play on the Quest 2, Assassin's Creed Nexus just as well on the Quest 2. The benefits here are just going to be clarity, textures, some effects, and I'm really looking forward to a time when developers will be completely unfeathered and unfettered to create something that only the Quest 3 can run to really maximize what the graphics look like on this new chipset. But the chipset won't matter as much if you're doing PCVR, and I'm happy to say PCVR games look fantastic here in the Quest 3. I did some virtual desktop streaming that got recently updated, so you can update your bitrate all the way to 200 megabits per second. Your desktop looks great, even though you're locked to one desktop at 1920 by 1280. But Link and AirLink also look fantastic in here. And if you go into your debug settings and bump up that bitrate to 300 megabits per second or even up to 500 megabits per second on a Link cable, basically see almost no compression. I won't say compression isn't there. To my eye, I can tell when the graphics are natively rendered versus being streamed and compressed. But a game like Half-Life Alyx, which still seems like the high bar in terms of texture detail, you're going to see all those details, much more detail in this headset than I did on the Quest Pro in terms of looking at your Russell gloves or even the textures on your handheld weapons and accessories in game. Things look so good. One place where I did miss the Quest Pro and native PCVR headsets was the contrast level, the black level. The dark grays on here instead of the blacks did, I think, make compression more noticeable when you're running at 50 or 100 megabits per second. And while the Quest 3 also has Wi-Fi 6E support, so I did have a dedicated router set up for 6E. I did have a little bit of network issues using virtual desktop at 200 megabits per second. Got some bit of latency in the network. And AirLink, no problems at 200 megabits per second or even 300 megabits per second. At this point, with Wi-Fi 6E routers still being pretty expensive, I think if you're on an uncongested network, you're going to get just fine of a wireless streaming experience with a 5 gigahertz band. 6 gigahertz band, it could be an upgrade path down the line once the compression algorithms get better. Or if, for example, you're using an NVIDIA 4000 series graphics card, which I don't have, which has AV1 encoding, the Quest 3 and Virtual Desktop does do AV1 decoding as well if you have the hardware. Now, with the thermal improvements on the 4 nanometer process on the new SoC here, one of the things the engineers could have done with the Quest 3 was give it a longer battery life. But battery life here is basically the same as with the previous headsets. It's between 2 and 2.5 hours, closer to 2 hours in my experience when playing games, 2.5 if I'm streaming video or streaming from PCVR. And so I expect a lot of people tethering their own battery packs and creating battery mounts to extend the battery life for long duration play, especially if you're using PCVR and you're doing long, Elite Dangerous simulation gameplay sessions. There will be an Elite Elite head strap with battery, which I didn't get a chance to test, which will add additional hour or two of battery life. But one thing to note with that new Elite head strap with battery design is they change it up. So here's the Elite headshot with battery, which plugs into the Quest 2, and it has a charging port in the back. That's how I plugged this into the Anker charging dock. The new Elite head strap with battery removes that USB charging port, which I think was a calculated decision to get people to try to buy their charging dock. Now you can charge that head strap by plugging the USB port into a wall wart or into a battery pack, but there's no way to get basically pass-through power on the headset while you're using the Elite head strap with battery. And you have to charge that when it's plugged in by plugging it into their charging dock, which I think is a step backwards in terms of design. Not very consumer friendly. Also, maybe not so consumer friendly is the price of this charging dock. It's $130. While it does do, basically contactless charging for the headset with those 3 contact points, as well as inductive charging on these Touch Plus controllers with the battery that you put in here. The battery itself is less than the battery life of a AA. You can see these lights turning on. So I think as a design, it's better than the charging dock that came with the Quest Pro, which was fiddly in terms of these magnetic attachments and getting those controllers to perfectly lock into place. One thing that I think is just unacceptable is that the charging dock here does not include the cable and wall wart. You're actually using the 18-watt power connector and wall wart that came with the headset on this charging dock, even though this supports up to 27 watts and 45 watts of charging. And where would you get a 45-watt Meta charger? Well, that's the one that comes with the Quest Pro. So that's something for $130 they should have absolutely included with the charging dock. I'm unhappy that they're nickel and diming users here. I say don't buy this accessory. Another place where it feels like they made a decision to not put the best they could have in the Quest 3 is in the RAM. So this has 8 gigs of RAM, up from 6 gigs on the Quest 2, but not as high as the 12 gigs on the Quest Pro. And RAM prices, as I understand it, pretty cheap these days, and there's no kind of passive power draw going from 8 gigs to 12 gigs, at least not in a meaningful way. They're saying that developers have still the same 5.7 gigs of access to memory between the Quest Pro and the Quest 3, so it's not like Quest Pro applications will have access to more and you can do more within an application. It's going to be more in the multitasking capabilities of the Quest 3. So this is some place where I feel like there's a missed opportunity. And I get that this is mostly maybe primarily a gaming headset with mixed reality features, and the Pro is supposed to be your productivity. But the Pro I felt like has been pretty underserved from both Meta as well as the developer space in where those productivity apps. One of the places I feel like I enjoyed the most in the Quest 3 is using the native home screen applications, these progressive web apps that they announced 2 years ago, I think in 2021. So things like the web browser and your Explore page and the friends list. I love running multiple web browsers. I love running multiple web browsers in the Quest Pro, and I really like using them in the Quest 3, especially with the hand tracking and the resolution. Having YouTube, having Google Docs, having a third browser for Reddit, all of that feels super usable in the Quest 3. I feel like that is a very viable alternative to having even a laptop open at an airport. I can see people using Bluetooth keyboards with a headset in a private working space. I've been using that in my public in my living areas, the kitchen, the dining room table, just wearing a headset, using a keyboard, which doesn't even need to be tracked now because pass-through is good enough for me to see my fingers and to see the keys. And browsing the web, using Google Sheets, using Google Doc, that all feels like there's untapped potential. And the fact that there aren't more of these progressive web apps, native applications like Slack, Discord, Spotify, things that were promised, months and months ago, feels like a huge missed opportunity. This past year of the Quest Pro, having that 12 gigs of RAM, and Meta should have pushed for more developers to make these native progressive web apps so that Quest 3 users could take advantage of that. And it feels like just a huge missed opportunity right now, especially since the number of mixed reality applications at launch seem a little bit underwhelming. Games that supported mixed reality previously, things like Cubism, Demio, with the better pass-through cameras, absolutely look great. It's my preferred way of using those applications rather than a rendered background. I don't look at my virtual home screen anymore. My home screen is the pass-through mixed reality view. But other than things like Figment XR, their Meta's first encounters, demo application, not a ton to do at launch with mixed reality. And so the strengths of this for me are the improved rendering resolution for games that you maybe already own and games that are coming out. One of the best things I saw, one of the best looking games I saw at Meta Connect was the Lego Brick Tales port that's coming over in December. That looked like PCVR graphics, but with pass-through mixed reality as the background. I can't wait to play and see those little Lego diorama scenes in the Quest 3 when that comes out. It's going to be a massive upgrade for Quest 2. It does feel like a generational leap for owners of the Quest 2 for the clarity of the optics, increased render resolution, the ergonomics, the comfort, all of that, and the processing power feels well worth it, especially if you can support your entire back catalog of games you've already purchased on the Quest 2, minus the ones they've discontinued, like Echo Arena. And for the Quest Pro, I feel for everyone who bought the Quest Pro. I definitely feel for those who adopted it last year at $1,500. People who bought it for $1,000, it's a tough call. This is the thing I've been struggling with most this past week, is going back between these two headsets. And I'm going to end up saying, if you use the Quest Pro as a PCVR device, I think you're probably going to still be very happy, and maybe even happier with the Quest Pro over the Quest 3 as a PCVR device because of the black levels, because of local dimming on the Quest Pro headset. You're not going to miss that extra field of view or render resolution if you're already doing super sampling on your PCVR side, and happy with that. If you are using a Quest Pro headset primarily for mixed reality, for web browsing, for those progressive web apps, whatever is available, for virtual desktop, you might want to use I think the Quest 3 would be a worthwhile, I wouldn't say addition, but a trade-in if you can offload your Quest Pro. And that's where I really wish Meta offered a trade-in program, not only for Quest 2 to pay an upcharge and upgrade to the Quest 3, but it would make a lot of sense, I think, for someone to trade in a Quest Pro if you could trade it for like a 512 gig Quest 3 model or a 128 gig model with the Elite head strap. I think that would be absolutely a fair trade. And for $500, which I know is $200 more than what the Quest 2 launched at, I think that's a pretty fair price for what you're getting here, not only with the displays, but also for the extra processing power and the ergonomic comfort that the pancake lenses afford. You're going to be able to spend more time in VR if you enjoy VR here. If you use VR for productivity, if you use it for work, you're going to get way more mileage out of this headset. Between the 128 and the 512 gigabyte models, I think the 128 gig is totally fine, especially with most applications being cross-compatible. If you have a fast internet connection, you can easily delete and download new applications. 128 gigs is perfectly fine even if you're sideloading movies onto here. Or what I do is you just stream movies off your NAS server using something like a Skybox VR or using virtual desktop. The essential upgrade, I would say, is some type of third-party head strap or some type of extra head strap, whether it's the Elite head strap or at Bobo VR, it may come out with. And I think you could probably skip the charging dock and the carrying case. I think those are probably inessential. If you wear glasses, I don't think you need any optical inserts. I was really happy with wearing my glasses in here. That was one of the nice surprises of the headset. And so to get I think a great experience with this, probably you're talking about that's $560 plus tax if you include that Elite head strap. So that's my in-depth review of the Quest 3. In many ways, better than I expected. In many ways, still a headset with a lot more potential to unlock. Depth API with more mixed reality experiences. I don't think it fulfills the mixed reality promise that we all are hoping for or that even the hardware can provide just yet. But it is, I think, fair to say, a generational leap over the Quest 2 and an interesting comparison with the Quest Pro. My recommendation for PCVR users, Quest Pro, big screen VR, whatever Valve may be working on is also worth considering. So you may want to hold off on the headset until then. But if you're locked into the Quest ecosystem with a ton of applications and love tetherless VR, and you're going to get a lot out of the Quest 3. If you have additional questions, things I didn't address, please post them in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm Norm from Tested, and I'll see you next time. Bye.